The bullet hit its chest. I saw the spark, metal on stone. It didn't bleed. It didn't flinch. It reached down and grabbed Emmet by the throat with one hand, lifted him off the ground like he weighed nothing. And Emmet was the biggest man I ever knew. 240 pounds, screaming, kicking, gone. Dragged into those trees in 3 seconds flat. We heard what happened next. I still hear it, every night, for 20 years. I'm gonna tell you exactly what happened in those mountains, what we found, what found us, and why one of us never came home. Stay with me. This one doesn't end well. Let me take you back. Montana, October 1903. The Bitterroot Range. 4 of us had scraped together everything we had for one chance at a silver claim. The easy strikes were gone. The big money had been pulled out years before. But there were whispers. Old trappers talked about a valley deep in the Bitterroots where the rocks still showed color. Nobody worked it, not because there was no silver, because nobody who went in stayed long. We didn't listen to the warnings. We should have. There were 4 of us. Emmet Cole, 41 years old, biggest man I ever stood beside, 6'4", chest like a barrel, hands like shovels. He could swing a pickaxe from sunup to sundown and still have breath to argue about the price of tobacco. I watched that man lift a stuck wagon wheel out of mud that trapped 2 mules. He was afraid of nothing. Nothing human, anyway. Samuel Ford, 34, former Army surveyor. Thin, quiet, wore wire spectacles and kept notes on everything. He'd mapped routes through territories most men wouldn't enter. He was the one who found the path into that valley. I wonder sometimes if he wishes he hadn't. Orrin Blackwood, 52, trapper, lived alone in the mountains more years than most men lived anywhere. He didn't talk much. When he did, it wasn't small talk. He knew things about those woods that weren't written down, things passed through generations of people who lived there before any of us came. He tried to warn us. We didn't understand until it was too late. And then there was me, Caleb Morrow, 28. Nothing to my name but a worn pack and a promise to my mother that I'd come back with enough to save the family farm. That promise got heavier every mile. Now before I continue, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. These stories don't get told anywhere else. And if you're already hooked, drop a like. It takes 1 second and it helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. The first 3 days went smooth. We followed Samuel's route through a mountain pass that climbed steady and dropped into a valley so quiet it felt like the world had ended. The trees grew thick, spruce and pine packed so tight the light barely touched the ground. The creek ran cold and clear. The gravel looked promising. We made camp on a flat stretch near the water. 2 tents, fire ring, food strung high between 2 trees. The dogs, 2 big mixed breeds named Cole and Flint, seemed happy enough at first. They ran the perimeter, sniffed everything, but that changed on day 4. Now listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to tell you happened exactly as I remember it, and I've spent 20 years trying to make sense of it. I still can't. Day 4. I woke before dawn with a weight in my chest I couldn't explain. The fire had burned to coals. Cole and Flint were pressed against the tent wall, not sleeping, sitting, ears flat, eyes locked on the trees. I'd never seen them like that. I opened the flap and looked out. The valley was silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. Just gray light creeping over the ridge and a stillness that felt wrong. Orrin was already standing by the dead fire, rifle in his hands. He didn't look at me. He looked at the ground. I walked over and saw what he was seeing. Tracks circling the entire camp. Wide, deep, barefoot, but not human. The toes spread too far apart. The heel sank deeper than any man's weight could press, and the stride, Samuel measured it later, over 6 feet between steps. Emmet came out and stopped cold when he saw them. He didn't joke. He didn't say anything. He just stared. Samuel knelt and traced the edge of one print. He said, "These weren't here when we went to sleep." Orrin finally spoke. He said, "Something circled us, close, for hours." He said, "None of us heard it. 4 men, 2 dogs, and not one of us woke up." That's when Orrin said the name. He called it the Genoskwa, the Stone Man. Now let me stop here, because that name meant nothing to me at the time, but Orrin knew. He'd heard the stories from the tribes who lived in these mountains for thousands of years. The Genoskwa, a creature older than memory, tall as the trees, covered in dark hair, strong enough to tear a man apart, and skin like stone. Weapons didn't work. Arrows bounced off. Blades broke. The old stories said the only way to survive was to leave immediately, show no aggression, take nothing that belonged to the land, and pray let you go. We didn't leave. That was our first mistake. We worked the creek that day, but nobody's heart was in it. The gravel showed trace color, enough to keep us there, but our eyes kept drifting to the tree line. Every shadow looked wrong. By noon, the dogs refused to leave camp. Flint lay flat by the fire pit and wouldn't stand. Cole paced in tight circles, whimpering. Around midday, a rock landed next to the sluice box. Not rolled, thrown. It hit the dirt and sat there, wet on one side, like something had just picked it up from the creek. We turned. The trees stood still. Nothing moved. But the feeling, I can't describe it right. It was like being watched by something that didn't blink, something patient, something that already decided what would happen. It was just waiting. That night we doubled the fire, stacked wood until the flames stood chest high. Orrin walked the perimeter and came back looking older. He said, "It's still here." He said, "It's watching." He said we should leave at first light. Emmet shook his head. He said, "I didn't come this far to run from an animal." Orrin looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "It's not an animal." We set watches, 2 awake, 2 resting. Emmet and I took first watch. We sat with our backs to the fire, rifles across our laps. The silence was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. Then the knocking started, wood on wood, sharp, deliberate, from the left, then the right, then behind us, 3 points, surrounding us. The dogs crawled under the gear and pressed flat. I wanted to fire into the dark, to do something, but Orrin had warned us, don't shoot unless you have to, don't provoke it, don't run. Here's where everything changed. Pay attention. Around 2 a.m., the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Then we heard footsteps, heavy, slow, coming toward camp, not from one direction, from 2. Emmet stood and raised his rifle. I stood with him. The firelight pushed maybe 30 feet into the dark. Beyond that, nothing but black. Then I saw it, standing at the edge of the light, 8 feet tall, maybe more. Shoulders wider than any man I'd ever seen, arms that hung past its waist, covered in dark matted hair. The face was almost human, almost, but wrong. Flat, deep-set eyes that caught the firelight and held it. No expression, just observation. It stood there, watching us. Emmet's rifle was shaking in his hands. I heard Samuel behind me praying under his breath. Orrin stepped forward, slowly. He spoke in a language I didn't know, soft words, respectful. The creature tilted its head. Then it took a step forward. Emmet fired. I'll never forget the sound, the crack of the rifle, the flash, and then a spark. The bullet hit its chest and sparked, like metal striking rock. The creature didn't flinch, didn't bleed, didn't stop. I raised my rifle and fired, center mass. The bullet sparked off and ricocheted into the trees. 3 shots, point blank, nothing. Orrin was screaming at us to stop, but it was too late. The creature moved, fast, faster than something that big should ever move. It crossed 30 feet in 2 seconds. One hand came out, grabbed Emmet by the throat, lifted him off the ground. Emmet was 240 pounds. It held him with one arm, like he was nothing. Emmet kicked, screamed. His rifle fell to the ground. He beat at the arm with his fists. It didn't matter. I raised my rifle again. Orrin knocked it down. He said, "You'll hit Emmet." The creature turned, looked at us. Those eyes. I'll never forget those eyes. Cold, ancient, deciding. Then it walked back into the trees, with Emmet still in its grip, screaming, calling my name, calling for help. We heard him for maybe 30 seconds, then something else, a sound I won't describe, a sound no man should hear. Then silence. We stood there, frozen. The fire crackled, the dogs whimpered. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Samuel fell to his knees and vomited. Orrin stood like a statue. His face was gray. I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't feel anything. Emmet, the strongest man I ever knew, gone like he was nothing. We didn't sleep. We sat with our rifles pointed at the trees until the sky turned gray. At first light, Orrin stood. He said we had to find him. I didn't want to. God forgive me, I didn't want to see. But we went. We followed the trail, broken branches, disturbed ground, drag marks in the snow, and blood, so much blood. We found Emmet 200 yards from camp. I won't tell you what he looked like. I can't. Some things you carry alone. What I will tell you is this. No animal did that. No bear, no cat, nothing I'd ever seen. He was taken apart, deliberately. His rifle was bent in half, like someone had folded it with their hands. Samuel turned and ran back toward camp. Orrin stood there for a long time. He said a prayer, something in that old language. Then he said we had to leave, now. We packed in silence, left the sluice box, left half the tools, took only what we could carry. The dogs didn't need commands. They pulled at the leads, desperate to go. We moved south, toward the pass, toward anything that wasn't that valley. We didn't look back, but we felt it, the whole way, watching, following at a distance, making sure we left. 2 days later, we stumbled into a mining camp near the Clark Fork. Samuel could barely speak. He left for the east a week later, burned his maps before he went. Orrin disappeared north within the month. I heard he died alone in the wilderness 3 years after, never came back to civilization. I went home, told Emmet's family there was an accident, a bear attack. I lied, because the truth was worse, and who would believe it? So what was in those mountains? The Genoskwa, The Stone Man. I've read the old stories since. The Seneca people knew about them. The Iroquois. Other tribes across the mountains. They all knew. Creatures older than memory. Strong enough to kill anything. Skin that no weapon could pierce. They'd been in those mountains forever, and they didn't want us there. Here's what I know now. There are places we don't belong. Places where something older than us still watches, still decides who lives, who dies, who gets warned, who gets taken. We were warned. We didn't listen. Emmet paid for that. If you ever find yourself deep in country like that, no trails, no sound, no sign of men, and you feel that stillness settle around you, trust it. Leave. Don't wait for proof. Don't wait for tracks. Don't wait to see it standing at the edge of your fire. Just go, because whatever's watching you, it already knows you're there. And if it decides you don't belong, you won't get a second chance. That's where I leave you today. If this story stayed with you, do me a favor, hit subscribe. I've got more of these coming. Things people saw in places they shouldn't have gone. Things they fought. Things that won. And if you want to hear another one right now, click the video on your screen. I'll see you there. Stay safe out there.